The game looks genuinely good, and I cannot wait for its inevitable PC port, PC port. Yeah, I kinda saw this coming. It's not hard to guess, or a Switch port for that matter. I have good foresight. At some point, Activision must know what they're doing to their games is bad for the consumer. I'm still convinced they're no more intelligent than a gorilla in a cage trying to get peanut butter from the top of a slippery slide. They'll get there eventually, just not anytime soon. I can pick any bad thing from my pool of things Activision has done to piss everyone off list, but the one that I'm drawing from the pool today is the one that Activision has been slowly trickling into its games and, annoyingly, has kind of gotten away with it. That would be the idea of partial physical copies. For those unaware, this is a term I coined back in August, where a publisher or developer decides to release a game to physical disc printing presses before the whole game is finished, and requires the rest of the base game to be downloaded via your preferred game store. I talked about the ramifications of this back in August, when the then upcoming Spyro Reignited trilogy required a massive 36GB download in order to play the other two games if you happen to buy the physical version of the game, as only the first game was on the disc, which obviously people weren't really happy about. Now, you'd think after 8 months, and with the release of the PC and Switch ports coming in September, Activision wouldn't be as stupid as to pull that stunt again. Boy, was I wrong. Somehow, the leg they had to stand on when it came to this has somehow gotten even less stable. The arguments I made last time are still very much in full effect here. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, it's kind of unavoidable, but if you want more depth then click the card on the right hand side, because I go way more into depth, but this is sort of a TLDR sort of thing. I refuted pretty much every excuse defenders of Activision had for the partial physical copies practice. One such argument for enabling partial physical copies to exist was because the 3 Spyro games couldn't fit on a single Blu-ray disc, even when they're remastered. Problem with that logic is that all 3 Spyro games in the trilogy come from the PlayStation 1 era, and they had to be fitted onto a 900MB PlayStation 1 disc, and there was a very good chance the 3 Spyro games weren't 900MB each in their extracted form. Games pad out the discs with useless ones and zeros to pad out the memory to fit the whatever standard they're on. Times that by 3 and you get 2.7GB at the absolute maximum, which again isn't likely to happen. The point I was trying to make was that the technical limitations of the PlayStation 1 era meant that the games are pretty short, even in their modern reincarnations, and therefore would probably be really easy to put on a Blu-ray disc. Also because assets had to be reused all over the place to save on the disc's memory. Shocking as it may be, the Spyro games still reuse assets from each other, basically. That's game design in a nutshell, save on time and space on storage. You're gonna see grass and plants and crystals shared over all 3 games, the same with character models, the same flowers, the same archways. It's a whole hodgepodge of stuff. These sound insignificant, but it does make a difference when it comes to storage, especially back in the PlayStation 1 era, where storage was at a premium. My guess was the game's true file size would be around about 20GB, which eventually I was proven wrong. The game, when it first launched, was around 62GB, until Activision and Toys for Bob pushed an update later on that added the option to firstly disable motion blur, thank you very much, and also halved the game's file size from 60GB to 31GB, which, and this is the reason why the argument of it won't fit on a single disc doesn't yield any fruit, video game companies don't like compressing their game files on consoles. You see this a lot. On PC, the game updates compressed to a sizable degree, but on consoles, it's completely in the air, which is stupid and dumb because hard drives are hard to take out, and in some cases you can't take them out, meaning you're stuck with the storage that you have when you buy the console, or you have to buy an external hard drive. That's why this whole partial physical copies debacle is so important, to stop people from running out of storage because you wanted to save a few extra pennies by ordering a different disc, or in the case of the Switch, a different cartridge type. Back in March of 2017, there was a interview between Tequila Works, the people who made Rhyme, and the folks at Eurogamer, with Tequila Works going on to explain why physical copies costs more to produce than just doing digital only, which obviously costs much, much less to produce. And they even point out that it's only indie developers that have this issue. When it comes to big AAA studios like, I don't know, Activision, for example, they can quite easily subsidize the cost. Sure, they will go for the cheaper medium, which is why there are games on the Switch that still do partial physical copies, like L.A Noire. That half the game is a download, but at the very least it's not as egregious as Spyro in that L.A Noire is actually quite big, and Spyro really isn't. Take with that what you will. Apologies for interrupting myself. I was going to explain that Blu-rays actually hold up to 50 gigabytes, and that is true, they do, but not by default. Those are dual layer discs. The misinformation I had was that dual layer discs were 100. That's not correct. That's BDXL Blu-rays, which weirdly only the Xbox One X supports, and the Xbox One S, despite Sony being a person in the Blu-ray Foundation. It's weird. Okay, not even the PS4 Pro supports them, despite doing 4K. Again, it's weird. Just wanted to put it out there. So, yeah. Another argument I saw in favour of partial physical copies was the argument Activision itself tried to use to hoodwink players into retaining its purchases after players threatened to cancel their pre-orders. Because the game patches are pretty common on PC and consoles, you should expect these sort of updates for games, so stop complaining about it. Okay, they didn't say that specifically, but the actual cut is a little cheeky in its implications. As with most games today, downloading an update after purchase is quite common. The language on the packaging and on the web is to let players know the requirements of Spyro Reignited trilogy. And, as I argued back in August, yes, the statement is technically true, a mathematician's answer as it were, as people do expect updates to games that they've purchased, physical or digital, online multiplayer or single player. But the argument falls flat in that most of these patches that these games get either add new content to the game or they exist to fix bugs that the developers found while the disc publication was going on. That's it. It does not, however, apply to forcing your customers into downloading 2/3 of a game because you have an insatiable desire for all the money ever in the world, and you wanted it then, and you wanted it as quickly as humanly possible. I think I called it a money boner or something, or words to that effect. So, how does the Switch port come into this, and why is it more absurd? Well, to answer the former, the Switch version of the game was recently put up for pre-order on the 29th of July, about a month before release, and a day later, Internet Sherlocks noticed that the game size would be 6.3 gigabytes. Many on the Spyro subreddit in particular maintained that the game would be that small due to godlike compression or something, and lower quality, well, everything. Textures, models, you name it, it's probably smaller on the Switch port. And while I do agree that the size of the Switch port would be smaller than 31 gigabytes, I did not, however, think it would be 6.3 gigabytes. The site eShop was updated a further day later to read 15 gigabytes, something that was far more reasonable and what I was expecting. Before we go on, do we all agree that 15 gigabytes is a reasonable file size that can be easily placed on a Switch cartridge? Not hard to do, correct? Yes? Good. This is called 5-second foreshadowing. Remember this. This is where things get interesting. NWPlayer123 on the lovely Twitter platform, a Wii U, 3DS, Switch, what have you data miner, did some digging in the game's files after they'd gotten the game straight from the eShop servers. I don't want to know and I don't want to ask. They confirmed over Twitter that the game will have two updates, one 6.3 gigabyte updates for the base game's levels, props and code, and the second update totaling 8.8 gigabytes that largely hold the game's cinematics. This was unintentionally confirmed via the official Spyro Twitter by way of a pre-order splash image on August 2nd, a few days later, which had the download required label on the box art for the Switch port of the game. Lovely. So, now we have the insane solution where Activision has made lightning strike twice and created the exact same controversy from 8 months prior, on the same game. That's incredible. Finally, people had cottoned onto the fact that Activision were pulling a partial physical copies move, and once again had worked out that they had rushed the production of the physical media to get the game out faster so they could make money faster, and, seemingly for good measure, save a few extra pennies by seemingly ordering the cheapest type of Switch cartridge available, because that's cheaper to do. Hell, there are even upcoming games like The Witcher 3 for example, which not only are just far bigger than the Spyro Reignited trilogy, probably twice as big, and they have more data to begin with and still look fantastic, and more crucially, can fit on a Switch cartridge. I'm not Activision's expenses manager, but I'm guessing it wouldn't have made much of a dent in the game's profit margins to put it all on the cartridge. The sad part is that the last time I reported on this, as soon as the game came out, nobody cared about the fact that Activision did this. Sure, people didn't like the decision when the news broke out initially, but when the game launched in November of 2018, no mention of how the physical copy was incomplete in-game reviews popped up. Nothing. This whole controversy was swept under the rug. I don't think it was foul play, for the record, in the game's media or anything like that. It was very likely game reviewers and journalists having the unintentional bias of getting a digital copy to begin with via download codes or review codes from Activision, which they often give to reviewers to, review the game before release, which just so happens to bypass the controversy. How convenient. I'm just sad at how apathetic people seem to be when it comes to issues like this come the day of release. The only time it was ever brought up again was, well, now. So congratulations everyone. Unintentionally, we've given the green flag to treat us like we all have unlimited internet plans and have moved on to digital fully. We haven't, obviously. Some players have not done that for various reasons, mostly internet related, because American internet is really bad and is split up into states, with companies like Comcast controlling specific states in a near monopoly, and because they have very little competition, they can therefore limit speeds, impose data caps, and generally just not be very nice. Yeah, that's totally fair. And I said this back in August, but physical media should be treated as close to an archive copy of a game as the developers and publishers can reasonably allow for. I'm not saying all data ever should be on the disc, as again, games get updates and patches to fix bugs and give players new content. That isn't feasible all the time. What is feasible, however, is putting all the base game data onto one disc or one beta tasting cartridge, one download, whatever it may be. If I want to fire up the game in 10 years time and I can't access the first 3 Spyro games because you require critical update to play the damn games I purchased on a disc, then that is a problem. I get the sinking suspicion that people will also forget about this as soon as the game launches to a PC and Switch too. Please prove me wrong, Internet. This shouldn't be acceptable. It really shouldn't. And with that, I thank you very much for listening.